Number 15. Rabies. Now, I'm not joking when I say that rabies is probably the closest thing we have to an actual zombie virus. The viral infection begins with a bite wound and travels all the way to the brain. That's when you become aggressive and start to drool. Rabies is one of the few diseases that can lay dormant in your system for years. Although most people start to display symptoms within 3 to 12 weeks after being bitten, others can feel fine for up to 7 years afterwards. You might go to sleep normally one night and wake up completely rabid the next. Well, almost. When the virus strikes, you'll start to feel weak and flu-like at first. You'll probably have a fever and get a heavy headache too. This initial stage can last for days. After that, things start to ramp up considerably. You'll stay awake for days and slowly start to go insane from sleep deprivation. You'll also experience extreme thirst, but you won't be able to drink. In fact, every time you try to take a drink, it will make your voice box painfully spasm. Nothing will make sense to you after a while, and this will only agitate you even further. You'll most likely act violent and experience vivid hallucinations as the virus makes your brain swell too large to comfortably sit inside of your skull. You'll shake, feel numb, and lose control of your muscles until you die. In these later stages, there's virtually nothing left for doctors to do. In all of medical history, only 10 people have ever survived the end stages of the virus. There may be plenty of preventative measures such as vaccinations, but when it comes to rabies, there is ultimately no cure. Number 14. Enterovirus D68. Also known as EVD68 for short, Enterovirus D68 has gained the attention of health officials everywhere in the recent years. Whereas most viruses tend to target newborns and the elderly, EVD68 seems to prefer children over adults, and it particularly likes teenagers too. Not only do younger people seem to contract EVD68 far more often than adults, but they also experience more serious health complications as well. You might feel like you have an ordinary cold at first, but every day you just keep feeling more congested, more fatigued, and more feverish than the last. It finally reaches the point where it feels like you simply can't breathe. You might wind up wheezing so badly that you have to stay in the hospital, especially if you already have asthma to begin with. In extreme cases, EVD68 can even permanently paralyze your limbs and face. To make matters even worse, contracting this virus is as easy as catching a cold, and it's more prevalent than ever before. From 1970 to 2005, only 26 instances of EVD68 were observed in the USA. Then, in 2014, a massive outbreak infected 1,153 people across 49 states. Many of them were rocked by the worst flu that they have ever experienced in their lives. A lot of them were hospitalized, some were paralyzed, and 14 tragically died. The virus disappeared the following year, but it resurfaced again in 2016. Isolated incidents continued to crop up in the United States that year, and the disease spread to Canada. At least 8 cases of EVD68 were recorded in British Columbia, 6 of which involving children under the age of 2. Meanwhile, in Alberta, one toddler was hospitalized after profusely vomiting. The child lived, but their face became permanently paralyzed on one side. EVD68 can only be detected by swabbing your nose or throat, or by taking your blood, and even then, confirming it with lab results is usually of little help. As any doctor will tell you, the disease is not curable, and you must simply run its course. Number 13. The mystery illness. In 2010, a large number of children from central Vietnam started to develop large, and painful blisters on their feet, hands, and insides of their mouth. These blisters were so extreme that they often looked like third-degree burns when they burst open. In 2011, the disease would come back to Vietnam again, this time with enough force to worry the world. That year, over 170 Vietnamese citizens came down with the illness, most of them children. This time, about 10% of the infected developed serious liver problems that led to other organ failures. 19 people died in extreme agony. The tragic outbreak triggered an investigation by the World Health Organization to determine what was responsible. They believe that the conditions could have been caused by environmental toxins, but other researchers believe the mystery illness is tied in with a virus that causes hand, foot, and mouth disease in young children. In other words, no one knows for sure. Whatever its cause may be, people continue to die from the potential virus to this day, though it has become less reported in recent years. The last notable death that made Western news was a 14-year-old girl who died of respiratory failure in the central province of Quang Ngai. Now, this is hardly the first time that a mystery illness prompted an inspection from the World Health Organization. In April of 2016, hundreds of Vietnamese citizens came down with a fever, started to vomit, developed yellow eyes, and experienced extreme fatigue. When the World Health Organization went to investigate 3 months later, they found every hospital bed in the area was occupied with sick patients. Just like before, they have yet to identify the source of the problem. Number 12. Herpes simplex 1 and 2. Now, anybody who has taken a health class should already know what herpes is, so I won't dwell on this one for too long. If you're not familiar with the herpes simplex virus, it is a sexually transmitted virus that can cause open sores to form on the mouth or genitals. There's no way to fully rid yourself of them. However, sores aside, herpes can also cause a fatal complication that is way worse. Sometimes, the herpes simplex virus misses its mark and travels higher than the lips. Now, it's extremely rare, but herpes can get in your eyes, and it can even go all the way up to your brain. If you get a herpes infection in your brain, it can cause severe neurological damage. You might pass out at random, have problems speaking, experience muscle weakness or paralysis, have seizures, mental problems, double vision, and you might even perceive strong odors where there is nothing in front of you. If left untreated, this rare condition can become fatal. All from a single kiss. Number 11. Dengue fever. Transmitted by mosquito bite, dengue fever is a catch-all term that's used to cover 4 different viruses which all cause the same ailments. None of these viruses can easily be treated, and, of course, none of them can be cured. The Aedes aegypti mosquito is the main carrier of dengue fever. Now, this is the same mosquito that's responsible for the infamous Zika virus, and, unlike most mosquitoes, this variety likes to bite people in the middle of the day. Once a mosquito acquires the virus, it will go on to spread it for the rest of its natural life cycle. When a mosquito gives you dengue fever, you're most likely going to have a high fever of about 104 degrees, along with a severe headache, stabbing pains behind your eyes, along with the rest of your joints, nausea and vomiting, glandular swelling, and a nasty rash. This will be your life for the next 4 to 7 days before things start to improve. That is, if you live that long. If you develop what's called severe dengue, then things will get worse instead of better. You will constantly leak blood from areas like your gums, or you may experience plasma leakage, which is where your blood cells break down from the inside and cause a buildup of fluid under the skin. Vomiting, respiratory failure, and extreme fatigue are all going to hit you at once. You're more at risk for this happening if you are a young child. Prior to 1970, only 9 countries experienced the dengue fever epidemic. Now, however, there are over 100 countries who regularly experience vicious outbreaks that are hard to contain. Most of these countries are in Latin America or Asia, but outbreaks have spread as far as France and Croatia in 2010 and Hawaii in 2015. As for treatment, there is not much that doctors can do besides give the patient fluids and hope for the best. Over 400 million cases of dengue fever are reported each year, and 500,000 of these cases are severe. Immunization appears to be the most effective form of treatment according to the World Health Organization. Despite their best efforts, this incurable disease clings to a fatality rate of nearly 3%. Number 10. The Zika virus. The Aedes aegypti mosquito strikes again with the Zika virus, a devastating disease that not only goes after you, but your loved ones as well. And not in a traditional manner, at least as far as most infections go. It's virtually impossible to determine if a person is carrying the Zika virus just by looking at them. Most people display no symptoms. Those who do display symptoms will only experience them for a week or less. They'll develop a mild fever and maybe have some minor joint or muscle pain, a rash, a headache, or reddish eyes. They'll probably write it off as a simple cold. Little do they know, they're now a carrier. Pregnant women have the most to lose from the Zika threat. The virus causes a wide variety of unwanted birth defects, the worst being microcephaly. This is a condition which leaves the newborn child with a cranium that is undeveloped and pointed at the top. They also have severe learning disabilities and often need a caretaker with them at all times of the day. Would you have ever thought it was possible to have the fate of an entire family permanently altered by the bite of a single mosquito? That's not to say mosquito bites are the only way to transfer a disease. You can get it from blood transfusions and sexual intercourse as well, though mosquitoes are the most common way. The Zika virus is largely a problem in South America, though mosquitoes in the United States are finally starting to carry the virus as well. The first case occurred in Miami-Dade County, Florida on August 1st, 2016. In addition, at least one mosquito gave it to somebody living in Brownsville, Texas, on November 28th of that same year. Where it goes from there is anyone's guess. Number 9. The hantavirus. Rodent infestations can carry with them an abundance of diseases, and the hantavirus is one of the worst. It can be found throughout Canada and the United States, where it's spread by the deer mouse. Although the virus can be spread by a deer mouse bite, this type of transmission is rare. Instead, the hantavirus is mainly spread through the mouse's bodily fluids, and this includes particles of mouse droppings that have gone airborne. Therefore, if you are ever walking through an old barn or an abandoned house and step on fresh droppings, or even if you step on the building materials that rats use to make their nests, then you may have just released the virus straight into the air. Once you are infected with the hantavirus, it causes a condition known as hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, or HPS for short. You might not feel anything wrong for up to 8 weeks afterwards, but then you'll start to develop a fever, headaches, muscle pains, terrible stomach problems, and you will become dizzy and cold. As with most diseases on this list, you'll probably think you have a flu at this point and stay home. Big mistake. Within 10 days, all of your HPS symptoms worsen. You start to run out of breath all of the time and heck up really disgusting phlegm. You don't know it yet, but your lungs are actually filling with fluid, and it's probably already too late. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, once you get HPS, you only have a 68% chance of living. There is no cure. If you go to the hospital, they will stick a tube down your throat and put you on oxygen. From that point forward, survival is up to you. Number 8. Acute flaccid myelitis. In July of 2016, a 3-year-old boy named Carter Roberts threw himself on the floor in extreme pain. "Mommy, Mommy, please help me," cried Carter. His parents rushed him to the hospital. It was the beginning of a long and terrifying battle against acute flaccid myelitis, also known as AFM. As doctors tried to diagnose what was wrong, Carter slowly lost movement in each of his arms. Within a short while, he was completely paralyzed from the nose down. This brings us to the present day. Now, Carter's mother has to watch her child struggle daily with not being able to move. His eyes are the only thing that he can control. Oftentimes, he cries and cries in frustration, frozen in his own body, unable to make a sound. Carter is just one of the more recent cases in a mysterious rash of AFM outbreaks. From January to August of 2016, he and 49 others were struck down by the disease. Many of them children, but some were grown adults. Now, as sad as this story is, Carter's recovery seems tragically unrealistic. Only a very small portion of children have ever bounced back from what the World Health Organization suspects is a dastardly virus that targets the youth. Most victims remain paralyzed for the rest of their lives. The first major AFM outbreak occurred in August of 2014, when 120 Americans were infected across 34 states. That following year, only 21 people were infected across 16 states, much less than before. As for the 2016 outbreak, at least one of the children infected has since passed away. Despite this tragedy, the Roberts family still continues to cling on to hope. Carter's aunt has started a GoFundMe page to help with his treatment, which is very expensive. I've provided the GoFundMe link in the description for this video. Help them out if you can. Number 7. Nicotiana benthamiana. This is a virus with a backstory like none other. Scientists were digging deep in the frozen regions of northern Canada when they came across a rather unique discovery. Under many layers of ice was a 700-year-old frozen pile of ancient caribou dung. The team of curious scientists took the specimen back with them to the lab for further study, and what they found was absolutely shocking. Inside of the frozen fecal matter was not one, but 2 viruses that were many centuries old. One of the viruses was a plant virus, and the other was an insect virus. As the scientists continued to study them, they suddenly got a bold idea. What if they could combine these 2 viruses into a mutant hybrid disease? The aim of this experiment was to test the durability of viruses in general. If they could use DNA from the 2 viruses to make an entirely new virus, then it would mean that viruses are much tougher than we thought, and that they can survive things like being frozen in ice for hundreds of years on end. Basically, they wanted to learn exactly how much punishment a virus can withstand. Using sophisticated cloning technology, the team spliced DNA samples from the 2 viruses together to make a new virus strand called Nicotiana benthamiana. After much hard work, they were able to take the new virus and use it to successfully infect a tobacco plant. The experiment was a success. What does this mean? Well, basically, bad news. The fact that a virus can survive hundreds of years in ice means that, as the ice caps melt, ancient viruses could be released in the future. There's just no way of knowing what old diseases are lurking deep in the ice, waiting to end us all. Number 6. The Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Imagine being sick for 40 years. Sadly, that's a real possibility with Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. This rare condition is also known as the slow virus. Truth be told, researchers aren't 100% sure if it is really a virus, but many of them have agreed that it most likely is. With that said, here's what we're absolutely sure of. In essence, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is like Alzheimer's on steroids. Even though the supposed virus can spend decades living inside of its host, once it does spring into action, it's only a matter of months before a person is reduced to a quivering shell of their former selves. That's because this condition literally eats the brain cells away and leaves large holes in its wake. This leads to extreme personality changes, as well as sharp decreases in motor skills and cognitive functioning. As the virus begins to devour the most vital parts of the brain, a person will begin to have trouble remembering how to eat, breathe, or maintain a heartbeat. Fortunately, by the time they die, they have usually mercifully fallen into a deep coma. Death, by the way, usually comes within 1 year of the initial onset. The only real way to test for Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease is too dangerous to perform on a living person because you need to remove a portion of brain tissue for sampling. As for treatments, there is absolutely nothing. Researchers have yet to find anything to even slow the disease down in the slightest, let alone stop it. Number 5. Heart viruses. Now we've established that viruses can sometimes cause your brain to swell, but did you know that they can do the same thing to your heart? I'm talking about viruses that are so strong they can literally rip your heart apart. Myocarditis is the medical term used when your heart swells up so much that it causes damage. And there are only a few different kinds of viruses that are strong enough to make this happen. Let's quickly take a look at them. Human herpes virus 6 is a type of herpes that no one is sure exactly how to get. It's not thought to be sexually transmitted like herpes simplex 1 and 2, and it's been found in the saliva of healthy adults. For whatever reason, it can blast apart the walls of your heart. Then, there's parvovirus B19, a nasty little disease that you can get from someone coughing or sneezing. Aside from giving you a rash on your cheek and a fever along with a runny nose, it can swell your heart up to the point where it no longer functions. Finally, virtually any member of the enterovirus family can cause myocarditis. You remember EVD68 from before? Yes, even that one. Myocarditis is so prevalent that it's believed to have caused between 5 to 20% of all cases of sudden deaths in young adults in America, though exactly what percentage of these heart failures are viruses and which are bacterial remains unclear. Either way, the heart condition can develop in as little as a week after the virus kicks in, at which point death is a serious possibility. Number 4. The variola virus. You probably have never heard of the variola virus before, but you might be familiar with what it causes. Smallpox. The variola virus is primarily spread by coughing or sneezing directly into another person's face. When this happens, open sores soon appear around the unlucky person's mouth and throat. As these pimples swell up with fluid and burst, they can get on a person's clothing and spread that way as well. In extremely rare cases, smallpox can be transmitted in the air. Smallpox has a fatality rate of about 30%. If it doesn't kill you, then it can leave you covered in scars all over your body, especially your face. It can even leave you blind. For centuries, smallpox plagued everyone from China to Australia. Global vaccinations have since made the disease a thing of the past. The last time anybody got it was in 1977, and the last major outbreak was in 1949. However, if you think your chances of getting it are completely nil, think again. The smallpox virus is still available in 2 places in the world. It can be found in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States and in the Russian State Center for Research on Virology and Biotechnology. This has raised concerns that terrorists could one day acquire the virus and release it on an unsuspecting public. Number 3. Polio. Like smallpox, this highly contagious disease has been largely kept under check by global vaccination efforts in the recent years. With that said, however, polio is too stubborn to fully eradicate, and furthermore, it continues to spread to this day. The virus stores itself inside of our lungs and intestines, which means that it can be transmitted through close contact with fecal matter, or even through a simple cough. Surprisingly, most people who get polio display absolutely no symptoms. This means that many of them walk around their entire lives unknowingly spreading the disease. For a select few, however, 1 infected person out of every 4, to be exact, the virus closely resembles the flu at first. This brief period of sickness goes away in less than a week, but for an even smaller portion of these infected, the symptoms get much, much worse from there. If the virus makes its way to your brain or spine, you're in real trouble. You might feel like your legs are constantly and painfully asleep, kind of like pins and needles to the worst possible degree. Or you might experience a heaviness in your limbs that makes your legs drag when you try to walk. If the muscles controlling your lungs become paralyzed, you can stop breathing and die. Only 3 countries in the world, Nigeria, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, continue to suffer from polio on a regular basis. In recent years, however, outbreaks have occurred in Kenya, Somalia, Mali, and even as far away as Ukraine. Traces of the virus have also been detected in sewer systems in Israel as well. So, as you can see, polio still continues to make its presence known. Oh, and here's the kicker. Sometimes a person will seem to recover from polio, but they're never in the clear. The virus has been known to return up to 40 years later to cause new bouts of extreme muscle pain, weakness, and paralysis. Once you get it, it never goes away. Number 2. Ebola. In 2014, the largest Ebola outbreak in world history brought tremendous grief to West Africa. Countless lives were lost from this terrible virus with no cure, and countless more were permanently ruined. This outbreak caused quite a bit of panic and misinformation to be spread, so let's get a few things straight. Humans can get Ebola only from direct contact from another infected human. Getting infected through air or water is not possible. If you do manage to somehow absorb their bodily fluids into your mouth, nose, eyes, or through any other mucous membrane, however, then you stand a high chance of becoming infected. When this happens, you'll start to feel sick within 21 days. There's nothing you can do to stop it, and the list of problems just goes on and on, seemingly forever. You'll experience an extreme fever, headaches, weakness, muscle problems, diarrhea, throwing up, pain in your stomach, and insane amounts of bleeding. In fact, in the later stages, you'll be bleeding out of everywhere from your eyes to your anus. What makes Ebola especially elusive is that it can hide in certain parts of your bodies for up to months at a time. You might eventually recover from Ebola and feel fine, but in reality you are still carrying it inside of your eye, further spreading it with every teardrop. Men can even carry the virus in their sperm from anywhere from 3 to 9 months after being infected. Since it hides you well, you can imagine how easy it is for one massive outbreak to happen after another. And once you display symptoms, there is little that can be done to save you. Sure, doctors will give you plenty of fluids and oxygen, and they'll try to keep you alive as best they can, but it's ultimately up to you to pull through. Interestingly enough, if you do manage to make it, then your body will have produced enough antibodies to make you immune from getting Ebola again for at least another 10 years, if not the rest of your life. In this sense, it truly is survival of the fittest with this germ. Number 1. HIV. The human immunodeficiency virus, also known as HIV, is a virus that your body can never fully get rid of. There may be some treatments, but there is no cure. By its very nature, the virus attacks the body's immune system, destroying the white blood cells that would ordinarily help you fight diseases and infections. In its advanced stages, your immune system is unable to fight off even the most basic of infections. The end stage is called Advanced Immunodeficiency Syndrome, or AIDS. When you first get HIV, you might just feel like you have the flu for a while, or you might not feel anything at all. This usually occurs within 2 to 4 weeks after getting the infection. You may continue to feel relatively okay for over a decade afterwards, but once enough time passes, you're in deep trouble. At this point, the disease has progressed to AIDS. Now you are losing weight so fast you're wasting away, you're always tired, you develop sores and blotches, and you start to experience terrible neurological disorders. HIV is thought to have originally started from chimpanzees in Central Africa. When people would hunt them for food, they likely came into contact with their blood. The virus slowly mutated over time, and when it made the shift to humans, our timeline was changed forever. Hello everyone, thank you so very much for watching. My name is Sir Aim, and I have my own YouTube channel. Just go to the description below and click it. I'd really appreciate you if you'd show up. Also, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time.